There's never been more data, more tools, more platforms, more AI capabilities available for marketing teams. And yet, the gap between having information and acting on it, it's not closing. So what is happening? The problem is not technology. It's not ideas. The gap is real. The gap is operational. Teams are drowning in possibilities and acting on very few of them. And here's what makes it worse. The markets and the customers are changing. They are faster, more selective, better armed. They use AI to filter, to compare, to cut through the noise. They don't wait for companies to get their act together and execute. So the question is, why in the era of AI are marketing teams still operating in manual? Welcome to this episode of the Julius Podcast. Today I'm sitting down with the team behind Agentica, where they are building an agentic optimization layer for marketing campaigns. We're going to get into some of the things that are broken in how marketing teams operate today, and why having more data and more tools hasn't solved the execution problem, and what it looks like to start closing the gap with AI that actually works. My guests are Manolo Castilla and Marcin Gruszka. Can you please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about AppTec and Agentica?
Sure, Jorge. Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm Manolo Castilla, and I have a bachelor degree for the Tech of Monterrey and a AI diploma from the University of La Rioja. I've been working with AppTec for more than 2 years now. And the company AppTec has 20 years of experience working with data analytics and AI. And we help our customers to transform the data into smart decisions to empower the business. Today, generative AI is much more than a buzzword and more than a reality. We use it and live with it every day. And in marketing world, it's no surprise that the data generation becomes a challenge. There is the structured data, statistics, surveys, market research, but also there is unstructured data, such as consumer opinions in video or voice. And we have to gather all of that information to give a proper feedback in real time, which is also a challenge. Today, we may have to wait a couple of weeks to know the true results of any campaign or activity. Today, we must gather information and fast to make changes that may redirect the objectives or the messages to the proper audiences. Agentica is part of AppTec's data and AI offering, designed to help brands improve campaign performance by making optimization faster, smarter, and more consistent. It connects signals, decisions, and execution in a continuous loop, so teams can react to what's happening in the market in hours, not weeks. The outcome is simple: less wasted spend, a high optimization cadence, and more reliable ROI improvements without forcing you to replace your current marketing tools.
Oh, thank you, Manolo.
And my name is Marcin Gruszka. I'm Director of AI and ML for Agentica.
Great to meet you guys, and thank you for joining us today. Before we get into questions, I know that lately you have been meeting with some of the most important marketing teams in the country, with very large companies, and you've been discussing about the challenges that they are facing in their marketing operations. So I'd like to ask you a few questions about what you've learned through these conversations, what you've seen. How manual is the marketing process today, from analysis to optimization to decision making and to actual implementation?
Well, from what we see here in Mexico and generally in North America, is that the process there is incredibly manual. And it's surprising with all these tools which are available that still process of executing campaign takes so long, it's so manual. I think that there is a caveat. The manuality of the process comes probably directly from the functional level, from the functional organization of the modern company, multi-unit, multi-product company. There is always somebody who in the product who initiates the conversation, and then there is a creative part, and there is a legal part, and there is a channel part and so on. So the problem of manuality is not that much of a task, is really the end-to-end process.
And what do you think needs to change? What types of transformations need to be implemented for this to be different?
Look, it is the one of the reasons we are so excited about building that agentic solution, because for the first time you had a chance to talk to the software the way you would talk to your analyst or to another human. The manuality of this or time consuming of the process is really a part of hands-off. So really replacing, and also an important conversation. The product people have their targets and they think particular way. The internal marketing organization have their way of interacting and they have a particular way of thinking. But it typically takes a human communication to align with our segment. What is our response? Well, how much money we have? Or how would you like to spread the budget? And so on, so on. And so this is the bottleneck we see over and over. And we believe that that kind of agentic solution and the new capability of the software, which are with us publicly available probably no more than 2 years, allowed us to address that communication.
So we have these cross-functional processes, right, that need to be executed. And you're saying there's complexity that comes from the different functions, right?
Yes.
And this, the more functions a process touches, the more complex it is to automate it. And now at the same time, there are some processes that are becoming obsolete. There are things that we don't need to automate. We need to destroy and recreate to achieve the same objective.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I mean, in this scenario, and you have a lot of experience also in management consulting. So do you think here's more of a change management challenge than a technological challenge?
I think it is both. It is, you see, just brute force automation is not resolving the correct issue. Most of the independent functions are fairly automated. Risk is automated. Some sort of a campaign execution is automated. Legal part is automated. They have their workflow and check. What is not really automated is the coordination between those systems. And I don't really think that you have to put more automation and more sort of efficiency looking in this communication. I think you have to change how the process operates. And that is really why we sort of excited about this agentic. Give me an example. Let me give you an example. There is often very enthusiastic test and A/B testing team. And they typically run maybe 3-4 campaigns at the same time, and they're looking for difference. Well, running, and they sort of start with maybe those preset designs, and they sort of compare results and response rate between those campaigns. They are using statistics, which is probably more than a century old. It is sort of this statistical hypothesis validation. And all those tools are really obsolete. So instead of testing really 3-4 campaigns, well, you can run 50 at the same time. You just have to have, and then instead of comparing all those results one by one, you use sort of the design like a bandit, when you sort of do more which works and less which doesn't work. But you always have this balance between exploiting and exploring. Traditional optimization is sort of having 5 choices and then finding the one ideal choice and focus 100% on executing that. That is, with the fragmentation of market, with the different desires of customers, thinking that you could create one campaign which sort of has this optimal performance, you are probably optimized within a niche and cutting yourself short. So what we are looking for a solution which allows you to run at the same time, not 3, but 50 campaigns. So you cover the variety of the niche and markets which exist within your customers. You have flexibility to adjust pricing. You have flexibility to adjust your visuals and all that. The time when you could have one large or two large campaigns and sort of have a dominant or reach your goals is probably gone. These days you probably have to have 50, 60 campaigns and with that sort of broad scope going to market. And it is impossible to execute with the current mindset of the functional hands-off.
Something that is happening along these lines is that now with Andromeda, the new algorithm, the new retrieval algorithm that Meta is using for its advertisement, it has changed the way we need to structure campaigns. So now, for example, a common setup is to have testing campaigns and then scaling campaigns. So in a testing campaign, you're always doing this A/B testing, right? At a very controlled budget and with a different process. And then once you find your winners, you move those to the scaling campaigns, where you have a larger budget.
Yes.
And now with smaller companies with smaller budgets, what we're seeing also is two challenges. One is that you need at least 2,000 observations to have a statistical significant number, of data, amount of data to actually have a 90% confidence decision if an ad is good or bad. And that's only based on platform performance. If we have an end-to-end optimization process where we are optimizing for revenue, you need even more observations to actually decide if you have an ad that should be promoted. And also, there's another challenge that we are updating ads, and Meta decides which ones to run.
Yes.
So then we have like this brain that is looking at the ads and deciding which one deserves the right to be tested. So that's a lot of power that we are, that Meta is attributing itself. So yeah, it's very interesting to see also how the platforms are changing, right? Because we can think about also how we want to change our process, but we live in a world where we have a duopoly, right? Google and Meta, they control most of the attention, of this desired attention that we want from our market. So we need to also coordinate with them and make sure that we are, that we are adjusting our systems and our processes to all these changes that they are also doing.
Yes, 100%. I agree with that. Look, I think that seeing that situation, we just try to help the internal marketing team in the largest companies to deal with that complexity. You probably cannot outdo Meta in the market they see, but there is also Google, there is also TikTok, there is also probably other sources. Well, and there is all part of direct marketing, which doesn't go through platform, but from the companies is important. So that's why we propose to bring some of those decision making inside of the company and sort of having the ultimate decision what sort of budget allocate to those large platforms. And then within those platforms, they probably can run it. One of this important part is that you ingest back to your optimization budgeting process whatever information comes from those platforms. They typically let you know what segment or micro segments they are using. That you have to bring those information inside and align this with your proper segment. As a good product manager inside the company, you probably know the market more than Meta. Of course, with some qualification, and using sort of their knowledge and using your knowledge, you probably can align those two objectives.
And following up on that, where are you seeing the most money being wasted? You were mentioning segmentation or execution, measurement. Where do you see that those resources are being wasted right now?
Yes, it's a good question. I had an opportunity to work a lot with the managers inside the marketing department in the large organizations. most of the time they are under tremendous pressure. They are probably receiving budget from somebody in the organization who has the P&L line, and they are required to deliver campaign, and those campaigns are expected to produce results. And most of the time they don't have a time to analyze, to select the best companies, the best campaigns, the best way to go to market. So they often use 80-20. For example, if you have 50, 60 different products, you operate with 5, 6 channels, all of a sudden you have about 1,000 different campaigns. There is no way that you could sort of analyze that and optimize. Therefore, you often use some sort of logistics, 50-50, equally everybody. And that sort of rule of thumb allocation, in my opinion, leads to fair amount of wasted budget.
It's interesting to see how these big companies are behind smaller ones, right? When it comes to best practices and campaign planning. Always, when people tend to think that larger companies are even more sophisticated or more advanced, right? But you're finding out this. For me, these impressive observations that you are actually finding in these very large companies.
You'll be surprised that as large companies, they have access to a larger amount of technology and processes. They are still very confused sometimes in specific things like marketing, because it looks like it's so much creativity in it. But you need to work with data and you need to work with the results. And that's sometimes that many people in the marketing teams, they lose their ways because of their great ideas, but they do not land them on hard results. And that's what we are trying to help them.
Okay. The pressure on performance is tremendous in the large organization, and complexity of both internal system as well as external market. You mentioned that fragmentation of the customers, so increasing sophistication of the customers, that requires, it's almost obvious, and everybody see it in large organization, it requires more campaigns, much more precise campaign, probably use of different channels and form, and this is video and this TikTok and all that things from one side. And another side internally, there is fair amount of regulation, compliance, stakeholders. That is really the reason that system works. But on the other hand, we have this incredible abundance in every supermarket, in selection of cars, in selection of clothes. All that's direct results of that large corporations, really.
Okay. And shifting from money to time, what marketing tasks consume the most hours and generate the least value?
Well, I think that certainly the analytics, the search for the truth in the numbers. Right now, as you said before, there's a lot of manual tasks that delays the whole picture of each campaign or campaigns. And what I think is that the analytics and the real, as you said before, the automation may be there, but the use of the analytics and then bring it out to make a whole decision, that's what I think it's the more wasted time that we have today in the marketing world. And not only for the large companies, we also have to think also for the medium and small companies that have low resources or less resources than the large ones. So they have to optimize their money in order to each campaign that they launch would be successful. So that's why I think that's where you have to work very much more attention to that, to the results and the numbers. And that's also that what I think is we are trying to help here.
And pulling it all together, why is it still so hard to turn data into decisions and decisions into action fast enough?
Summarizing, internal and external complexity of the market, hands-off, internal hands-off, and the need for multiple forms of marketing campaigns.
I also think that the information is not all integrated. We know that today we have lots of sources of information, and at the pace that you have of gathering information in a big bucket of data and not letting no one, not a piece of information out. That's the key to have the real information in real time to make faster decisions and better decisions. If the data is wrong, you won't be able to make a right decision for whatever you will do in the future.
One of the most important complexities with data in marketing is that this data is in many systems, right? It's fragmented across systems. And the most important dimension for data analytics is the user, right? We want to grab users' attention. We want to gain their trust. We want them to buy from us. We want them to do repeat purchases. And we want them to recommend our products or services. So for this to work correctly, we need to be able to identify our users across platforms, paid media platforms, online stores, CRM systems, our websites, applications. So based on your conversations with these large companies, do you see a challenge in data integration? No, it's a very old challenge, but do you still see challenges with data integration and user identification? Or do you think this is something that is already fairly solved in companies?
It changes from organization to organization. Over the last, I would say, 10 years, the large organization invested incredible amount of resources into pulling data, creating the data lake, and giving an analyst a sandbox and so on. That I think it's like there are diminishing returns in that area. So I would rather, on the other hand, the amount of data which gets produced in the point of contacts, in the old school of bringing this data inside large corporation, it just doesn't work. And so with this new sort of agentic way of working, we think that there is opportunity to reach the data where they are and use that sort of a new way of programming with the coding, which allows you to align the segment from, for example, with Meta or Google, with the segment you're using internally. That would be a work which would typically hire or ask your analyst to figure it out. So could you find out how I can see the customer from this segment in this platform versus our own platform? And then the analyst would probably build some traditional machine learning models. With this new technology, with large language models, we can sort of run this task more relying on those large language models in the more agentic way. And they are probably 80-90% right. And this is all you need to execute.
Of course. Now, if we are able to solve soon this challenge, there's another challenge that is attribution, right? So we need to understand these users. So let's say we solve the problem of identifying what our users are doing across systems, but we need to have user acquisition, right? That's very important for growth. But we are also facing a lot of challenges regarding privacy, right? So is there a way to improve attribution models by using an agentic approach?
Yes, they are. But I think that, look, it is probably a little bit controversial, which we have to say. If you are a company and you are a product manager, if you are somebody who is your internal sort of stakeholder for the agency, they don't care too much about attribution. What is really important, that has this campaign generated some sort of impact, some sort of move the needles. Therefore, the problem of attribution is, in my opinion, highly technical problem with the marketing department have to resolve with their sort of more automation, better tool, better statistics. But from the company perspective, it is, in my opinion, how we are thinking about the Agentica, secondary issue.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view, and of course, I think you're right. No, it's full of controversy, right? Because another way of looking at it is that we have an optimization challenges. We need to assign budgets across campaigns. We need to assign budgets across audiences, and at the end of the day, we need to see what's working and what it isn't if we want to maximize revenue given a budget, right? This is that traditional optimization setup, right? And so we need to also see what's working and what it isn't, right?
Yes, but look, you can select one approach and be consistent. So it is irrational to expect the attribution to a great degree changes sort of your prioritization or your results. Look, it is if you have a consistent way of calculating attribution, well, then what will make one campaign better versus the others are probably how close you are to the segment you are serving, how good your product is aligned with the need of the customer, how well you target that. That would be at the end what will differentiate the company. And if you consistently attribute, you are probably okay.
There's a very common discussion between Meta and Google regarding by using last click attribution models. No, it seems that Google is the champion of return on investments. And then what Meta says is that there's this upper funnel that they do very well. And also Google regarding YouTube and their display channels, right? So there's this continuous discussion on how much of your budget should be assigned to your lower funnel versus your upper funnel. And when going to the upper funnel, how do you can actually know if it's working or if it isn't, if there's a disconnection with the data tracking.
That is super important, but these are the discussion inside marketing department. They are not the discussion on the business side or the product side. They those issues are a little bit invisible for that. Look, what we with Agentica propose, focus on obtaining the maximum value from the product, from your budget, and that often means that we do not really optimize clicks. We optimize sort of conversion, and in certain way, in certain level, and you also have to understand what kind of value generate that particular click, and that value depends on the characteristic of your product or your segment. If, for example, somebody acquires a credit card through some referral traffic, well, the performance and the value the company obtains from the credit card depends a lot in how the use of this credit is subsequent use of the card, and that sort of expected value could be used in targeted particular segments. These are issues which probably Google understands, and they always try to connect the offline and inline behavior, but you frankly don't have to give it to them. That is always the power you will have versus the publishers, and you have to be very smart how to use it.
How prepared are these organizations to actually use AI as part of campaign optimization?
Well, I think that in a whole sense, organizations are in not only marketing, but for everything. They are still thinking how to get a proper real result with AI. It doesn't matter if it's marketing or human resources or accountant or operations or whatever. So there's a lot of space and there's a lot of opportunity areas for everybody to work on with AI in every part of the organizations. But in marketing, since today, as we see every day, in every media, in every source of information that we have, we need to, and it's been the way that it's approaching to the younger audiences and consumers. I think there's a large gap today to be filled with AI, and not only for creating campaigns, but only to optimizing them and to obtain the right results and getting the right information of all the process that we are talking about. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of tools right now. And we have to be very, very careful to choose the right one in each step. So I think there's a great green ground to work with today.
Okay, so let's be more pragmatic about this, and I want to ask you a very direct question, because there's so many ideas, so many content, so many options. No, as I said before, we are drowned in possibilities, and so you're mentioning this. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do, but we are not doing anything. And so, where to begin? If we need to choose one, I know this could be different for one company to another, but with the organizations that you have had conversations recently, if you were in charge of choosing one thing to improve, to fix, to transform, what would you pick?
I would ask the team to focus on two things. Focus on their functional area and go as far as possible with this focused use of AI in market research, in targeting, in creative, and so on that. And the second activity I will focus is to enable to get rid of the linear process of executing campaign from design, validation, hands-off, and all this department. That is a bottleneck. And the AI allows you to really to allow those independent department working independently in parallel, and then leave the AI to integrate and select the most optimal campaign from the available material. That is something which I think is a game changer.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is, okay, let's have, first of all, individuals using the tools, right? I think that's something we all agree, and it's happening, right? Everyone is using AI right now. I mean, it's in marketing departments, everyone is using it for whatever reason, and that's easy to do, and I'm sure it's having benefits. I mean, for everyone here, I'm sure it's having benefits, but it's not transforming anything, right? No, those benefits are, we're not working less, we're not selling more. Well, but there are benefits for sure. Now, if we get rid of the linear process, that means we're going to have independent functions, sub-functions inside marketing. Then you have graphic designers producing a lot of ads, right? And then you have campaign implementators setting up the new campaigns and optimizing campaigns. Right? So I can imagine these independent units working using AI without coordinating among themselves. What I can't see yet is, how do you see an agentic approach in making it, in automating or simplifying this coordination instead of the linear process?
Yes, and they would work in this new business model in parallel. So you would have a market research which would, in the context of your product and offer, identify, doing probably design research or almost sort of experiential research, the way the idea would do, or one of those design companies, they would develop maybe 5, 6, 20 different segments, and then they would sort of stop that part. Then would be probably a marketing team which would take the insight and create for each of the segments probably 5, 6, 7, 10 different campaigns. And then would be legal team which would approve all that. They would understand that there is that none of the claims are false, and so on and so on. And then you would have, and then the act of pulling it together and producing the right campaign, that is agentic work. That is the combination of setting up the bid, which goes out to the publisher, seeing what kind of results are coming in sort of the modern way of the Bayesian way, updating the results and deciding to crank up or turn down particular campaigns. That sort of integration I see as tremendous impact of AI. I think we will have opportunity to maybe go and explain what kind of 6-7 different agents we have and how they work in Lucian. And that's sort of the change in the way how we work will be apparent in this conversation.
Are you in the process of creating, or have you already created, like this project management agent that coordinates these different independent units?
Yes. Look, no. And the reason we have not created that, because we leave that role for humans. We believe that all that system should sort of automate the some of the task or optimize some of the task. But I think we didn't want to invent too much task into sort of having the system fully autonomous. It will probably happen, but at this stage, I don't think it's necessary.
What are the most common discussions that we're having in different groups when talking about AI and agents in marketing? It's the bottlenecks, right? We're trying to understand, and once again, this is different depending on the team, the industry, but we want to understand with so much abundance regarding intelligence or regarding design capabilities, where are the bottlenecks moving? I mean, are they actually moving? Are they in the same place? What is happening with bottlenecks in let's say, in marketing operations and in business growth?
Yes. I think that the bottleneck is still the linear way of thinking. When maybe 10 years ago, we could execute only maybe 5, 10 different campaigns, and we were very careful to find out which is performing better and less. That is the still dominant mindset in the marketing department, and a lot of automation efforts we see operate within this business model. They try to produce maybe a better sort of automate maybe sending this campaign, but there is the abundance of information and the way we could communicate with the agents. It changes the way how our business model may work. Again, repeating, we don't care in this view about analyst sort of producing some sort of scorecard or reports and telling you which of the 5 campaigns perform better. That is no value, because that sort of analysis and the decision making which comes from that could be all automated. That is why we see sort of the optimization in this sort of high level optimization as our sort of most important agent. That it has a view not only what happens with so what we send to the agency, what happens in the traffic, but also what sort of value it generates. That sort of optimizing that in the ongoing basis, that all you could automate, and a lot of work, in my experience, in this internal marketing department is about this sort of task, which administrative task. They don't really add that much value.
The mother of all bottlenecks is the market itself. We can't sell more than we have consumers, or can't sell more than the money these consumers have. So if we think about that, then, and we build from that, right? Companies, what we're doing is we're competing for that market. We're competing for market share. And to gain market share, we need to gain users, new users, upseller users, cross-seller users. But that's, at the end of the day, we need to connect with users. And then user acquisition or customer acquisition becomes one of the most important roles that we need to work on in marketing. And then we also have another bottleneck or another restriction, that is our budgets, right? We're limited by the resources we have to acquire new customers or to grow our existing business. So when you see it this way, the actual bottlenecks that we have or the actual restrictions we need to solve for is optimization, right? We need to optimize how we allocate our budget in the best way so we can maximize the number of new users we're gaining, or we can maximize the amount of revenue we're getting from our existing users. So I know you guys are a lot into optimization. So I'd like to ask you, how do you see this agentic approach to solve this very important problem in marketing teams?
I think it's a key. You mentioned that fundamental restriction or limits of the market. Well, one way you do with that, you segment better.
Mhm.
Instead of having 1 segment, 3 segment, 5 segment, you can have 50 segments. And having meaningful 50 segments with reasonably different message and maybe even price point or presentation of the product, that is something which requires AI. This is one of the agents which these are really the agentic platform allows you to address that in an efficient way. If your organization is running X 10 campaigns and you understand how the process of approval, launching those campaigns happens, well, could you imagine in that sort of environment running 100 campaigns? Probably not, because it would require additional resources and so on. And that is the issue which the agentic platform is attacking. It allows you to address the demand of the market by a much higher level of granularization. It allows you to coordinate those resources which are required to produce the campaign in sort of this agentic way. And it allows you to monitor performance and sort of select those best performing the campaigns. And you have to be, there is no silver bullet. There is not even 5 silver bullets. You probably have to have 10 or 15 of them. And they are probably dynamically changing. That is really a different way of thinking about the A/B testing and monitoring. And those elements we sort of think we try to address with this agentic platform, using the new technologies, the sort of large language technologies, which allows you to not to build the software in different way.
Yeah, and it actually helps solve this problem we've seen for a long time. So we know that segmentation is very important for optimization, right? I mean, it's better to optimize if you divide your market, but at the same time, this was not possible before because of execution and marketing operations. It was possible through the platforms, but actually doing it, actually executing on that was very difficult. And now we can do it. And I reconnect this with your idea about the linear workflow. If we are operating at a large scale of segments at the same time, trying to do this in a linear way, it's impossible. We need to scale it. We need to rethink the process and rethink the marketing organization.
Yes, and behind each of the standard process, like reporting, I don't know, this performance comparison, if we are using the tools and mindset from last century, like I mentioned, the statistical hypothesis testing, it's Fisher, it's well over 100 years old. We are not using the newer math. If we are using reporting, pre-canned reporting, dashboards, well, we are using tools which are not adequate to that to the situation.
Yeah, and I think that you said, you asked before if where it would be the one that we would choose. I think that it has to be with the quality and quantity of information that we have about that. Because as you said, we have the algorithm, we have the technology, but if you don't have the whole or as much information as you can have, you cannot do much with it. So if you have to choose, where you have the most information, the best data, so you can feed the algorithm, so you can feed Agentica in order to have that result. That's and then you push the organization to work on data, on good data, to have that as your prime asset to feed the algorithm, anything that you have, and that's when the AI will work as in its better stage.
Look, we building on what Manolo said. Look, one of the way we propose to start is saying take one most important business line or product in your organization, and instead of trying to divide the budget for one of the platform, ask us, hey, how can I, let's assume, sell or convert most of this product? And then let the algorithm or the process decide how much should go with Google's, how much we should go Meta, much should go with TikTok, which sort of form it should go to, and all that, the work behind, which kind of segments do I get in each of those platforms, which kind of message, which kind of format, which kind of response. All that work is really which could be done behind scenes with sort of this agentic organizing the production and coordination and reporting in an agentic way. And you as a manager, you could ask, hey, how much traffic did we generate from this particular ad or this particular channel in this particular region? Most organizations still have to have an analyst who goes and downloads some of the data and does the stuff. No, that is really a little bit obsolete way of working. One of the agents, we call it, we have it, is this with this reporting agent, which does something which is probably well established, which is the text to SQL. You can, as a manager, you could sort of formulate your question, and that large language model would generate SQL, would query the database, and then we return the information. We are not going too much into the details, but sort of one important part in building this agentic system is coordination. And many times this sort of completely autonomous system, that there is another large language model which coordinates that. You ask that question, what is the role of are you automating the manager? And we said, no, we don't want to automate that kind of sort of managers. However, we need to have those agents coordinated, and we coordinate it through a data table. There is at the heart of all this agentic system is a table which essentially at the campaign level lists or gives you the information how much value you have generated through the budget of this campaign. And all agents work independently are fitting this table. There is a configuration agent. So all of a sudden, if you decided to run, Halloween campaign or this Easter campaign or whatever campaign, you very quickly design your campaign, and the system sort of pulls the data. Sometimes it's sort of almost marketing department or creative jogging something, saying, I have this campaign. That system will inject this information and create this kind of skeleton of this campaign. And then there is a updating agent. Agent really controls all your digital property and brings you sort of information, what happens there, so you actually can understand what sort of value created this campaign, and so on and so on. And we have this basic setup of those 5 different agents, which could be executed, I think, probably week, 2-3 weeks. And then you could go wild and sort of constructing and evolving those agents, adding some additional functionality upstream, creative and so on.
So we're approaching the end of the podcast, and I always say that we need to be moving forward, right? So what can we do? What can people that are listening to this podcast what can they do to move forward? How can you help them to move forward in this journey?
Well, we have a proposal for all listeners and everyone that who's interested in optimizing their campaigns. And right now we are offering a free campaign optimization readiness assessment. It will be no more than an hour to talk to them, that where we will map their channels, their KPIs, the data signals and current workflow, and identify the fastest MVP for them. So that's what we can do to help them and start a good relationship with them.
This sounds great. If you're interested in going through this assessment, please, we're going to leave a link in the description so you can fill a form and be in touch with AppTec. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to share this space with you guys. Thank you very much.